Welcome to Autism Virtually. We have Jen, Corey, which is me, Scott, and Jack.
The Bodhana Group, which just to give a brief intro for folks, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're based in York, PA. We use tabletop games, whether RPG or board, for education, capacity building, and therapy. We actually, ironically, we got the idea to move into doing gaming after our first fundraiser as a nonprofit. So when we originally started, we were all about working with victims of sexual abuse and also like child and teen persons who had perpetrated sexual abuse. That's where we had worked for like 10 plus years in facilities, and we needed money as a nonprofit because it was a tough time back in 2010. And we ran Save Against Fear, which is still to this day our annual tabletop based fundraiser. It's a 3-day game con that we run here in York. And so even from just that first event, we started talking about how gaming was more than just fun, but how if people are getting these benefits on their own, what could it possibly mean if we then took an experienced practitioner, someone who's, a therapist, a counselor, a social worker, clinician, and we built goals into the process where we, as we say, we bring characters to life. So what you learn at the table, you can take into your real day-to-day interaction, or we find the right game for the right reasons. Where, if we want to teach, everybody uses the term social skills, but if we want to teach socialization, where there's cooperation, collaboration, conflict resolution.
I work as a behavioral health technician, and so we also use games, but we have to call them non-preferred tasks because we're not allowed to use the word games because I guess that's supposed to be too fun. And we'll do it on, for example, like Candyland or, like not the kind of games you use, but you're right. Like we use it for turn taking, following the rules, being able to step by step, also being able to, handle losing sometimes in a safe way, which not all of my clients are great at. I wanted to ask you, when you started this group, Jack, was it basically like you had this vision and it was you have to convince the world this is great, or did you have a lot of support?
More of what we found is there's a very supportive community around this idea, and mostly those are folks who, now that we have had like 40 plus years of Dungeons and Dragons, and as far as the role-playing hobby and board gaming since Catan has been in like its emergent renaissance, right? Like board games were very popular during the 1930s. They were excessively popular again in the 1950s and 60s and in the 80s. Like, so we've had these moments where gaming has been a popular part of our culture. But I think with the advent that so many people grew up with gaming that are now in the professional sphere. I mean, we meet so many people and we get so many emails of folks who are going, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only person who thought about like using role playing or using board games until I found your group. And I'm like, no, we didn't invent this.
I was wondering about the tactile quality of gaming, games, and
I think a lot of that is really preparing the play space and preparing the players. Like, one of the things that I say a lot about whether it's role playing or board game use, a lot of people make a lot of assumptions going into the use of this type of approach with kids, teens, or adults. And they go, well, it's a board game. We set up the game, we play, and there you go. And I'm like, no, wait. There's a lot of considerations, right? There's how we teach the game, how people differently learn the game, how people enjoy the game, why people are playing the game. Like, there's so many considerations, and that's just one of them. Looking at just the amount of real estate, right, that a lot of modern board games can take up, and how personal space also then factors into a lot of this. Not to mention also making sure everybody can reach the components and making sure everybody can hear and see what's going on at the table. Like, there's a lot of individual concerns to make. One of the persons that we work with, I do notice that when we're learning new rules or we're playing a game that's what's called a legacy game, and we have noticed one of the things that will happen is that he'll kind of signal when rules are getting too difficult for him by he'll repeatedly touch, grab, and release the pawns on the playing field. And we've kind of taken this, like, we don't go, no, don't do that, because obviously it's a self-stim for him, it's a soothe for him. So we'll instead just go, are we putting too many rules in? So we use that as kind of a signal, and we'll go, well, you could just let us know there's a lot going on that you maybe would like us to explain it.
It's good to segment your rules. It's really good to kind of break things out into digestible concepts, I think.
My son, he's very bright. He's in college. He's a senior. He's physics. Like, I can't even make sense of the stuff that he has to do in his classes. But he's constantly misjudged, often because of how he moves. He has to stim a lot. He walks a little bit differently. He'll move his hands. People have always assumed, sadly, that my son has mental slowness to him or other issues.
Right.
So my question to you is, do you come across that as an issue, even with parents? Some parents may be thinking, oh, well, that's above my son, he can't talk, so or just putting limitations on some of your clients that you feel shouldn't be put on them.
They make modifications. There's the D&D dyslexic character sheet, there's braille dice, there's also, I feel, room for creative exploration. We talk about PEC boards and PEC books and speech, text to speech devices to help folks. Yeah, why don't if kids playing a wizard, make their spell book a PEC book, so in the game they could either touch tap. What they would do is I cast cone, and then it could be fire, lightning, whatever. So now we're using the game maybe to expand vocabulary also. So I think that there are definitely a lot of modifications, and it's always been a principle of mine, having worked within the IDD community for as long as I have, that anyone, you can make modifications as long as you are working with someone and not working on someone. We had one family that was interested in services for their child, and when they came, they wanted to do role-playing games. It's not that the person can't do role-playing, but some of the focus that the person had at the moment was too much of a barrier to maintain a narrative. So instead, what we're doing is we're working to that by, first, we're working on board games that encourage cooperation and intercommunication. So we're practicing the way that a D&D party talks together. Then we're going to utilize games that like Cora Quest, or where it's like a dungeon crawl, so we can then see, okay, can we construct this narrative in this adventure while we're going through a board game that is cooperative? So we're using the games, again, very structurally and intentionally to build and develop different skills, while also measuring where the capacity for the person is, with the eventual goal of, narrative role plays, and I think that a lot of people have, through either media representation or, when we didn't know, or I would even go further to say we didn't bother to investigate appropriate supports because it was difficult. People have been given this false idea of what a person can or cannot do, where if people are just given resources and given support and understanding, people can accomplish a ton, right? There are sometimes real world limitations, but we shouldn't impose those, because sometimes the nature of how we experience any sort of diagnosis or condition or whatnot is already sometimes limiting on it in and of itself, right? So unfortunately we've seen that, but on the other hand, I think because we use such a creative modality or approach, I think that it allows for us to see growth in an area that is not as traditional. Like we'll say, well, so and so doesn't really engage people or want to talk to people. So what we'll do is we'll say, okay, so they're in a role-playing game group with us. Not only are we going to teach them and work on goals and skills and whatnot through role-playing, but let's teach, maybe if the kid is interested, how to be a game master. So then we say, okay, so you know how to be a game master. How did that feel? And they go, that was pretty cool. And even his mom was like, this is amazing. Look at what you've done. And I go, no, no, that's not my victory. That's his victory. Because he took that interest and that passion of gaming and he used it in a way that worked on so many skills that if you would try to do that through like a workbook or a worksheet or like, these non-creative engaging activities that people try to use, the game provides a platform that, now we could say, we'll start a game club at your school or start one at your local game store. Now we're talking about building natural support systems as opposed to just purely insular support communities, which neither are better or worse than the other, but they offer different things, For anyone who wants to find out more information about us and everything that we do, we have a wealth of services that we offer. If you're local to the York area, we do run in-person RPG groups. We also are running in-person board game groups, which you can find on our site, www.thebodhanagroup.com. We also offer training and consultation for organizations that would like to start their own game-based programs. And those are both RPG and board game format. And of course, there's Save Against Fear, our game con in November. That'll be in York, PA at the Expo Center. And you can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter at the Bodhana Group, on Instagram at the Bodhana Group.